Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And, as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. We are going to be discussing this time mixing up combat and all of that. So, and figuring out different ways you can change around your combats and do stuff with them to make them more interesting or change them up. So, that's the plan for this time. Before we get into that, let's go ahead and get into announcements. I'll start us off so other people can think about how they want to do their announcements. This is, of course, I am, of course, Adam L. Spain with the Inn of Planar Crossroads. We are currently making our way to $100 a month through different support methods like locals, Patreon, Subscribestar, or direct contact and reaching out to us directly. So that's our milestone for this year. We are trying to get that done, and if it extends into another year, I don't really care. I'm up for whatever you guys are up for. I will say that if we get there and then exceed it, and just keep on going, I'm heavily tempted to get a few sets of custom dice made. And if we exceed a little bit over, maybe they'll have to be metal dice. So, just throwing that out there. Temptations to you all. But that's what we're going to be doing as far as announcements on that. We're going to be doing, of course, starting the next month from when this comes out, so March, we're going to be starting up our collaborative content themed around specific things. March's content is going to be themed around March of the Mechs. So, sci-fi type of mech type of things will be coming up next month with Dan and Jacob from Avenue Studios. So, take it away, Dan.
Hello, everyone. Avenue Studios. I'm Dan, and you can find us anywhere on YouTube podcasts and Rumble. And yes, I'm very much looking forward to it, because when you're watching this, it will be so soon. March of the Max, very excited. We'll be doing our Force Forge, where we're building in Foundry, and then we'll be playing that game as a live stream with some of our patron and local supporters, so it's going to be really great. We, of course, live stream Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, and play in many different systems, hopefully, especially by the point you're watching this. We'll be doing Savage Worlds, Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu. I'm very excited to see what we get to in this year with the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And as of recording, we are 3 supporters shy of our supporter challenge, which will unlock a special movie night we do, which supporters gain access to a movie night with the team of Avenue Studios. And for the special one, we're watching my senior thesis, Kanaga, and there'll be lots of giveaways, dice pads, minis painted by Zechariah. He's already planning some special ones specifically for this, and all the giveaways will only be for our locals and Patreon supporters. So if you're interested in joining our little forest family, that is something we're very much looking forward to. And yeah, I appreciate all these guys here, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
Cool beans. So like you said, we'll be branching out into lots of different systems. The current system they're running right now for their main thing of Bomb Squad is Open Legend, which is owned by the Great Moustache JP.
Yo. Well, I gotta announce my cat Lucy, because she is very unhappy with me, so much so that she has her back turned to me as she is sitting down, because I am not paying enough attention to her right now. It's just hilarious to me, because she never sits like that. But anyways, yes, Open Legend, currently working on getting some new physical books done up, because certain things in the community made it so that what I thought would last through the first of this year has ended up selling. So they're currently out of stock. Probably I'll still have the sale going on even when this goes live, which is the Amora's Dawn setting for Open Legend. The physical book is heavily discounted by like $20, so it's basically half off. So it's $20 plus shipping. And if you use the code SWITCH, you can get additional $5 off.
There you go.
Weird.
All right. So that means...
I have it somewhere here. It's a great book. I highly recommend.
There you go. So, that is both Avenue Studios and Open Legend, and that means that we're done with our announcements, and we're on to our spotlight. So, Levi, whom or what shall we be spotlighting this time?
In this case, it is a what? It is Dungeon 23, which is in one part a hashtag, but it is a project to help people design mega dungeons. The goal is to pretty simply designed make one room a day for an entire year, collating weeks into their own levels of the dungeon. That way you have by the end of a year, a large thing that you could run for quite a while. Dungeon campaigns are very good on prep time to reward of gameplay time. One of the things about it is that it's also sort of a share online with other people, so that way people can see each other's progress, see how things are going, get inspired from each other, and in the future, we intend to more specifically talk about that.
There you go.
And some of it is that actually it's the entire month is one floor. So the Mega Dungeon will eventually be 12 floors. I think was the original. But of course, there's several variations and different ways that people are going about it.
Okay.
Right.
I think I misread on one of the things I was looking at over it for then.
I've been showing the viewers a Cobalt Press article that says D23 is a challenge for the community, whether game master or game designer, to create your own mega dungeon throughout the year by designing a 12-level 365 dungeon in a notebook. And I think that was something that Moustache brought up earlier, that it's meant to be something that's you can do as quick as just putting it in a notebook. So.
Oh, I did forget to announce one other thing.
Oh.
Dan, which body of water do you get bonuses to sail across? The proficiency.
I always try to think too hard.
You were trying to name off all the 7 seas or something?
I was trying to think about all the names of the major oceans. I was like, which one has like some kind of joke in it? No!
7 seas.
What kind of noise does a witch's vehicle make? Broom. Broom.
No.
Yep.
Okay. Back on track.
All right. Unless it's a vacuum, then it's... All right. We're getting way off topic here. Let's go ahead and gather around the fire, sit down and warm our feet as we consume our preferred beverage, and talk about mixing up combat. So, anybody want to go first specifically? No?
I can if nobody else wants to.
Hear it.
Well, you did bring up in our pre-chat kind of thing that you're over on the Open Legend Discord. They've been talking about mixing in challenge event type of stuff with your combat. So I have specific experience about that, but if you want to highlight what they've been talking about first, then go ahead.
Well, it was a little less that they were talking about their general discussion about stuff. And I was like, yeah, well, some of the ways that you can do it differently, right? Just to make it easier and do things differently. So if you don't know what challenge event, it's generally where each person picks one attribute to roll. Depending on what system you're doing, they might need to have at least a proficiency in it or not. And there's even different ways you can do it there. But the way that I do it with group challenge rolls is probably everybody's going to roll at least twice, if not more. And so instead of doing the normal combat things, I use my sword, I use magic, whatever the attack is, I got a position. It's just like, okay, all I want you to do is, all right, everybody roll an attribute that makes sense for Open Legend attribute, right? or it could be a skill in other systems that makes sense for your character to do during combat. All right, we're going to see the goal is to get at least a 15. The goal is to get at least an 18 on your roll. If you get more than that, you succeed. If you get 10 above that, you exceptionally succeed or you critically succeed, right? And so they'll roll and then I'll be like, all right, so now describe what you're doing in this battle against these goblins. Okay, how did you succeed? Dan over here rolled a 2 again. What it's usually if somebody doesn't succeed, I'm like, all right, tell me how you messed up, right? Or tell me how you fumbled something while you were doing it. And then other people can, feed off of that. And so it's a different way to do the combat instead of having to do specific attacks. And I'll usually, not always, but I'll usually use this for combats that don't necessarily not matter as much, but aren't going to be as maybe cinematic, because this is a way to make it more cinematic. Because if you're going against a bunch of minions, it's obvious you're going to defeat them. Mm-hmm. Right. So instead of making it a slog, can make it interesting via doing it this way, right? So it's just all right. So there's some successes, there's some failures. How wounded you are afterwards depends on how many successes and failures you've got, right? Mm-hmm. And so that way it gives a lot more narrative options to the players as they're going through, whereas before, and it'll depend on the group, but it just lets them overall summarize how in 30 seconds or 1 minute this roll affected the combat scene.
Indeed. And I have actually used something like that in the Adventure Academia. So when I was doing that, especially in the cinematic battles, I don't necessarily do it in the battles with regular kind of minions or regular goblins or something like that, but I did do it in the mini boss with the secondary boss and main boss of that particular scenario. So it was handled pretty much like you were talking about. All the stuff would be going on normally in combat, but the way I handled it is I rolled a die. I had everybody roll dice in the game, depending on how many players there were. If there were 4 players, they would roll. Let's see. I usually tried to balance it out to how many turns there would be in the normal rounds. So if there were extra minions, they might roll differently. But if it's versus one thing, so there's 5 different turns, I would have them roll a d6 or something like that, or d12. I think I used the d12. Oh yes, I used the d12 because the d12 was never used. So I used the d12. And in that, the players were rolling to figure out what turn, after whose turn it would happen. I used lair actions in it. And that's a way you can mix up combat or have these challenge events come up. So say that the players were going along and one of them had rolled a 3 at the beginning of combat on their d12. And they can roll this in secret. You can have them roll in secret for you once they figure this out, that what you're doing, so they don't know when it's coming. But say 2 turns go by, the 3rd turn goes by, and one of them had rolled a 3. At the end of whoever's turn that is, at turn 3, the lair action happens right after that. It's like tied initiative, and it goes right after that. And that lets them be like, okay, this happens, and you are now in like where we were. They were fighting the dragon, and say the dragon's a huge wave of power bursts into the dragon, and he flaps out, and this huge wave of green energy flies out. What does your character do in this moment to address what has happened to them? So
it's like a mini game in the middle of combat.
Right. You mix up combat and you change it around and make that challenge event right there. It happens quick. They have to make a quick decision, and then the combat continues. So what you're doing is you're keeping combat interesting for everybody. Everybody has to be paying attention because they don't know when those rolls are going to come around. And then what you can do is after all of those, if it's a particularly long combat, after all of those D12 rolls have come up, you say, all right, roll me your D12s again. And you change where they are. You change where those layer actions happen in that long combat. That makes everybody pay attention, be like, okay, we don't know when these are coming up. They could hit right after each other, or they could not. We don't know. And it keeps a mystery there for everybody, which it makes it more fun. The kids, after I started doing that with the boss battles, they were paying more attention. They were like, well, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? And I'm going to probably have it hidden this next time if I have repeat players, which I should. I'm going to have it hidden so they don't know. And I'll insert it when it comes up. And then it'll be like, oh no, time to do the challenge event. So that you can do that with players of any age, and it keeps them engaged and paying attention. So that's how I've mixed up combat and incorporated those challenge events into how I run games, which still makes me want to run a session of Adventure Academia up there next time I come up to Avenue Studios. So then the kids could play.
Sure.
Well, anyway, that's how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
So what about...
Quick shout out. Wow, just quick shout out. Our Druids table, where you talked about this a little more at a sci-fi level with Zek and his Star Wars game. We kind of tapped into this as well, in how to utilize the challenge event style for high-level play, where you're starting to hit that point in systems where the players are so powerful, it doesn't matter what you throw at them. You now transition maybe the narrative, transitioning into a narrative, or adding it in, like Moustache's idea of doing a whole combat narrative, or with Adam mixing and matching. That could help in a high-level play situation. And we go into a whole discussion on that on the Druids table that I think really meshes well with that too.
Something I find interesting about the way both this version has been discussed of, like, minions, or when the players are so powerful, is that this sort of keeping the combat entirely in more like skill checks or like time challenges, is that also works really well for when the enemy is a lot stronger than you, and that you are rolling those to survive as opposed to rolling those to flavor how you win. Like Pathfinder 2nd Edition uses that for kaiju fights. I say fight loosely.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's because I had that as the not first experience, but one of the most notable experiences with this method of resolving a quote-unquote fight. It is interesting to see it dichotomized the other direction, to where it's like, hey, we all know who wins, so let's roll to see exactly how it happens. Kind of applying from the other direction, which makes it more interesting than sometimes where people are like, well, if your players are so much stronger than the enemies, why even roll? This gives it a better feel than like trying to run a proper combat where they more slowly just win.
Right.
And it...
No, I like that a lot. Because I did for Bomb Squad with our time skips. I did challenge events to cover. This is another good thing with the challenge events, is they can cover larger spans of time, like Moustache was talking about, like a whole minute, versus that would take forever at traditional combat rolls with the general 6-second idea. Covering larger expanses of time. And then for the time skip, of course, as we always say, I talked with the players beforehand about this, but the idea for those challenge events was success is simply you get everything done without any bad stuff. So there was no bonuses to succeeding. It was you start with everything's going to happen the way I want. For each failure, you're falling farther and farther below that. So that can be another thing also beneficial for high-level play, where generally, because the players are rolling so well or have the bonuses and items that they need, they're usually always succeeding, starting with a assumption of success, and then for each failure that finds its way in, that brings it down, rather than starting with a low base and for each success you're getting more. Which I think, and correct me if you guys are wrong, but I think a lot of times we assume that there's a baseline low, and for each success you're getting more on top of that, flipping that on its head and saying success is the best you can get. For every failure, you're going to get farther and farther away from it.
Well, and that's how I always look at challenge events. It's overall, you know the outcome. The question is how many complications are going to happen at the end of it, and every failure is a complication. Like, for sure you're going to reach like if you're doing an escape scene, right? For sure you're going to escape. But once you've escaped, what are you going to encounter immediately after that? Are you going to face just 2 henchmen? Are you going to face 10 henchmen? Are you going to face the big bad who's also escaped? Or the big bad's brother, or, whatever, right? So the more failures means the more consequences, right? Or the more complications. That's what I like to say. The more complications you're going to face afterwards, which may or may not be an encounter. It may be, okay, you're injured. Oh, you have the fatigue bane. Oh, you're exhausted. Or, you take 10 damage, 5 lethal damage, whatever, right? So that's kind of how I always look at it. So I think I've always considered the challenge events in the same vein that you were just talking about. But I like what Levi was saying, because in the Cyberpunk game I'm playing, one of the things that, in session 0 that I was talking about the players and what they wanted, they're like, yeah, we understand that there's going to be certain things that we would not win against and that we need to run against, right? When the big corporations send their hit squad, right? You don't want to be in the streets. When MacTech comes out, the super charged up police force that takes care of cyber psychos or whatever else, right? You don't want to be fighting those guys. Those guys have all the best equipment. You're not going to survive. You need to get out of Dodge, right?
They're specifically designed to take out the cyber psychos.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So like what Levi was saying, like that doing the challenge event as like, you got to get out. This is like, how bad off are you after you get out? Because how many successes and how many failures?
Man, I almost wish we'd had this discussion before last game with Bomb Squad. Because it's interesting. Again, on the flip side, because playing in like an open legend, which is more heroic, there's that opportunity where the baddie could get taken out real fast. And if narratively you don't want that there, but you still want to have the players feel successful, yet fearing this greater evil, that could be a nice way to do it. Setting up that situation where it's like, they know they wouldn't in a head-to-head fight. This makes it clear that you're not ready yet, or this would not go well. They can still have some successes. You're still maintaining that level of threat without having to go in and they accidentally roll, 60 plus on their die because of explosions and stuff.
Or get killed.
Yeah.
Or the flip.
and the other thing is, because it's specifically with Open Legend, it's, every roll matters. So if they can't beat this thing, they shouldn't be rolling against it. But this allows them to still do something, right?
Right. They may not be winning, but they may be escaping.
Yeah. So it's like, and that's where it's important to talk. And some people worry about, meta. I'm sorry, but every tabletop RPG is already meta, because you are not that person. You are a person playing a person, okay? You don't have the same knowledge. You don't have the same fears. You don't have the same experience. It is literally a meta game. So to say to not meta is, but that's a discussion for another time. But like,
not bad discussion though.
I agree. Yeah.
So it's a meta game. And so, but you should upfront say, all right, you guys cannot win against this, and let them know, not just be like, let him try and go, ha ha ha, your 75 didn't hit him. Now he's hitting you for 150, right? Because that's not fun. But let him know, because in that setting, especially in Cyberpunk, they would recognize the elite police force. They would recognize the elite corpo squad, right? It's like, all right, you cannot beat these guys. So challenge event, if we're going to assume, well, in this case I wouldn't, but in most games I would assume that you escape. In Cyberpunk I'm not, because the whole thing in Cyberpunk and the theme of Cyberpunk is, you can die, right? It's how you how you die that you're remembered for, right? It's kind of what Cyberpunk's, but so
the dark future,
I'd be like, if you have too many failures, you guys are not going to escape out of here. But I'd say that up front. I'm like, okay, this is the CR for your rolls. If you have this many failures, you're not going to escape. Now, does that mean that you're dead? Maybe, maybe not. It'll depend on the rolls and what happens, right? But so you can set that up and make it so that it's like, so the player's like, wait, we cannot beat this guy and we need to escape, and just be upfront with them. Now, so one of them might decide, hey, my flaw is this, I'm going to stay behind so that my teammate, the sacrifice, right? So, you never know what a player is going to do. And you're like, no, you were supposed to escape. I don't want you to die here. Well, I'm as invested in these characters as you are, and I want to see them do awesome things. I don't want to see you die. Don't die, Akiro. But so that, you're muted, Dan.
Thank you. Sorry, I was opening a can.
A can of whoop. Now what?
Yeah. Challenge event. I really like that idea too, that even in a very difficult situation, you can allow the characters to be heroic to whatever brackets you have for that setting or anything. They can still do something cool. Even a death scene could be really epic because you're generalizing it. You're expanding the time. That one role is being expanded to cover more time or more things, more actions. It gives you a lot of flexibility to really make the most of the moment.
Yeah. There's so three things come up to my mind from what we've been discussing. The idea that there's the escape, but there's also the chase. Chasing is really good if you're trying to do a chase scene, because they can be a bit dodgy to deal with when you're going through the different zones that you have of, like, Call of Cthulhu has like a line that you're going through, and each of the pieces move, metaphorically speaking, along the line until you get to the end. But in between that, that's a time where you may, if somebody catches up to someone else, then you can have direct combat. But until they catch up, they have to keep going through these challenge events to catch up. And so you can have that back and forth. And not only that, but the players and the bad guys are still involved in a back and forth, still involved in the initiative order if necessary. And so you can move through that chase, coming from the other side, and say, okay, you've caught up. One of you has caught up. You're no longer doing in the challenge event. What do you want to do in this moment? What if you want to use a combat thing, you can now. And you can still frame it in a challenge event if you want, or you can say, no, they can say, no, I want to get ahead of them. Well, then they have to roll challenge event instead of an attack roll. And you can move ahead of them and bypass them to cut them off or something like that. And so you have a lot of options when you start to tweak the way that you're letting combat flow and incorporating these challenge events into them. So that's kind of my idea with that chase/escape. Goes both ways. You can mess with it. There's also the idea that this is pretty handy for if you have a B plot happening while a combat is happening. Then it's a good way to have that go on. So everybody loves to split the party, right? So you got the split party. That means that you can still keep your initiative order, but the people that are in the combat as a distraction, not even really as a, we want to kill people or, kill the enemies or something like that. We're the distraction as the combat, and someone else some other group of the party is sneaking in, that allows them to be a challenge event that are sneaking in, but the combat people can still be doing their combat stuff. And you can allow that to work back and forth. And you don't have to go one way or the other. And it lets splitting the party be a bit more kindly to the idea of splitting the party. It's not as punishing then, because people are still contributing meaningfully to that goal. And then the third thing was this would actually work really well for large-scale encounters. So if your characters become, it would be 5th level in Pathfinder or something like that, or 3rd level in Open Legend, the idea that they've got enough clout to get some followers or get people under them, the idea that there might be a larger combat, or that they might be placed by a lord or a lady, some noble, over a certain amount of people in a larger scale battle and be expected to command them. This is where you can let those combat rounds happen normally, but mix in at the D12 rolls or wherever you decide to, those moments of, okay, now you need to roll. It can either be your character, if you want to do that, they can roll something, or you can have a specific thing for no, this character that's following you, you need to roll for them now, use their thing. There's this group or this army, or if you want to go that detailed into it. And okay, you roll for them now in this challenge event to see how they're handling this huge battle that's going on around you. So those are some three ideas I've got about it that came up.
The second idea, it actually relates to one of my favorite gaming memories I have. So I was ironically a very combat-focused build at the moment. It was a 5e game because a lot of people in college were playing that. I was sharpshooter, found ways to get advantage on attacks, action surge. I threw a lot of arrows into bodies for a lot of damage.
I recognize that one.
I was a Warforged. Anyway. It was a good time. I have some qualms with how much I enjoy 5e as a system, but good people, whole thing.
Yeah.
So the irony of this was that because of how things were going otherwise in this Curse of Strahd campaign, I was the best bet to distract this major priest of an area that we had gotten large suspicions that things were going creepy. So one of the most combat-centric people went up to the priest as a distraction to talk about theology, basically. And every time the conversation took one step into a weirder, darker place, that was when the GM was like, okay, now we go to the infiltration group. And then they'd go, and then they would not in the grand sense that everyone knew where they were, but some spirits haunting a specific building in the area found them. They would roll for initiative, and then it'd go back to my conversation. So every time the tension was brought higher, for one, I actually think it was so she had more time to think about exactly what she wanted the priest to say. Looking back at it now from a more little timed perspective and some time to have some stats for the things. Because they were going around and there were bodyguards and there were ghosts and right. But this splitting the party, but specifically finding tension points to do your ping pong. The whole time their fight was going on, I was also just sitting there thinking about what I would say, what I wanted to do, how I could keep him talking without compelling him to magically experiment on me.
Yeah.
Solid choice.
And it got to the point where I saw them through a like my teammates through a window, and he didn't. So I was at this blending of the otherwise let up story moments, and like my character did not see it, but as they explored other things, the words that had been said earlier in the conversation took on a scarier weight, and the things they were seeing took on a weight, and like it's a meta game, there was a different sense of enjoyment we were each getting from the stuff that our characters didn't know, but we could feel that. I believe dramatic irony is the word I want right now.
Yeah, because I think I know the
Moustache.
I think I know the priest you're talking about, but yeah.
And there were modifications that she made to the exact setup up here. There was an NPC we had befriended otherwise who had been experimented on, who I don't think was even normally up there in the core book. Just so that way we were more tied and felt a need to go visit this priest. And there was like a stained glass theming, which was neat. The idea of like the priest adding like bits and pieces, as in creating his own stained glass to make perfection. And as the conversation was ending, he was at first talking about Shootbot, whose name was actually Sierras, but everyone found that hard to pronounce, so Shootbot. But the core point of all of this is that splitting the party between two different styles of gaming can be used to draw a lot of attention to both, while helping people flit in and out of a different mood to keep what's going on interesting. But also, it's one of my favorite memories, so I wanted to talk a little extra about it.
And as a GM, I want you to know that, GMs always know everything that's going on and have it all planned beforehand. So the switching back and forth wasn't for any prep reasons. It wasn't to get anything set up.
Yeah,
they already had it all figured out.
They knew what you were going to say before you said it.
I was so emotionally invested that I couldn't take time to think about that at the time. It was good.
Well, that's awesome.
So I think another way to mix up combat, not just challenge events, but is to subvert expectations, which we talked about just a little while ago. But doing some things such as having them roll for initiative just to build tension, to make them paranoid, to make them think there must be something going on, and then they spend their round trying to search and look and perception checks and this, and then it just ends up being something benign, something simple. But it gets the heart pumping. Letting them do little perception checks, or if they do something, to notice something that's interesting that changes it. So there was one sci-fi campaign I was doing, and they were supposed to retrieve this robot that had escaped or something. And so they were doing this, and one of the persons noticed that robot looks like it's more of a suit than a robot, and there was a person inside of it. And which, completely changed what they were trying to do with this robot, because the robot, we'll just blast it and then, you can repair it or whatever. But, there's a person in it, and the size is either a small person or maybe a young adult or something like that, right? And so now they had a different concern and a different worry, because that just completely changed what they were doing. So little things that you can do like that to just change little notes to add into a combat for them to see.
Changing it from destroy the enemies to how are we going to deal with this in another way besides destroying all the enemies.
Right. If you have a chance to, if they're supposed to take somebody out, but maybe as part of it before they take it out, if they're trying to research it, and then one of them ends up talking to the person, and then they find out that he's been working really hard this last month because he's trying to get his kid into this special school, and then making it so that, oh, are you going to get invested in this NPC now and then maybe not want to have to kill them, or are you just murder hobos and you don't care? Right?
See, everybody wants to do the wanted dead or alive thing, but nobody wants to mess with the wanted alive.
Too messy.
Yeah.
Alive and still sentient.
Oh, that would be
Good
important to point out with the whole magic stuff. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The one thing I'm thinking about with everything everyone's saying too is it's adding a cinematic flavor to the combat. Especially, I was thinking about Levi, your story too, because there's that flexibility with time. Because how long does it actually take to have the conversation? But compared to what the rest of the party was doing, doesn't really matter. You're matching dramatic tension points to it and stuff. And the challenge event sort of idea allows the player that's role playing to still roll something and feel involved and connected, and matching it. And you can be flexible with time, because combat's always tricky when you're assuming that if you're in the most systems, assuming that 6 seconds, right, per round sort of thing. And then I'm losing my train of thought in there, but I think generally what we're getting at is that adding that cinematic element to a lot of what you're doing, even like Moustache talking about rolling initiative, and now going reverse, almost bullet time, where you actually don't need that, but because every second now counts in the player's mind meta-wise, it adds this tension to the scene that wouldn't otherwise be there if you were just doing general, like, yeah, roll your perception check. And I also like to, like in Open Legend, you have the minor action, letting them roll something, and Moustache does this too, letting them roll something to maybe gain an advantage on your next turn, using your perception or your learn, using those generally non-combative attributes or skills to somehow influence the combat that's going on. That can be a really cool thing, and rewarding players who choose for their main thing rather than to just attack the enemy to do something like that. To maybe get a better sense of what's going on, or I feel like there's more going on here, or I want to understand the enemy more. That may just turn into just an additional advantage on your attack in some way, or it could completely change the story, like Moustache was saying, where it goes from just straight up kill it to maybe we should incapacitate, or maybe we should talk our way out of this. Thinking outside of just your classic I attack or I use the spell, and rewarding players who think outside the box, even if you're just in your standard combat turn order.
So another interesting thing, especially talking about cinematic and stuff, is maybe they prep for this fight. Maybe they're getting ready to go into it, and you're like, all right, so here's the scene. And you describe it like cinematically. We roll over, we see the guard going up to another one, and have this dramatic moment of this conversation, and even describe it like, unbeknownst to the players are right there in front of you, right? So you're intentionally creating a meta here, and create this conversation where it's just like, maybe it just completely changed. They're ready to do this, and then they hear this conversation. Are they still going to make the same decisions now? Because, yeah, technically it's meta, but...
Right. Oh, and that reminded me of when Levi was telling his story, too, jumping back to what you'd said, that the whole game is meta. Because, like, Levi, like what you're saying in your story, technically your character didn't know what the other players were doing. But as a player, you get to see and experience, and that adds away. And that does come to a cinematic movie style of, like, technically this character doesn't know what the other character's doing in the scene, but because we're switching back and forth in the shots, it's influencing our feeling over what's happening in the individual scene, because we know these other things are going on. So that can really add some weight.
Yeah, the priest talking about the importance of flesh and soul binding together, and then you see some flayed individual in their laboratory, you see that whole idea of flesh is getting much closer to the idea of literal trying to bind type things, especially if there's like flesh melding going on inside that particular scenario. So you have that to build off of, those narrative moments to build off of. Two things that I've done for mixing up combat in different ways, or at least handling combat in different ways. Building on the initiative thing, I usually have, when I'm running, I usually have the group roll initiative at the beginning of the session, so that we can do anything in initiative if we need to. That is a way to mix up combat, because then they don't know. You don't say roll initiative anymore. Everybody's already rolled initiative, which means they have to be ready anytime to be like, okay, initiative has begun, or we're in initiative. What do you want to do? And you can, like I said, use initiative for anything. So they're trying to do some social stuff. Okay, roll initiative. Okay, who's doing... you guys are doing some exploration. Who's going to go first? Okay, you're first in initiative. You go first. Type of thing. Even if it has nothing to do with combat, and it allows you to better get a handle on the flow of the game as a whole, not just the game in combat. And then secondarily, when I was running the Beast for the 1000 subs one-shot, the Beast was very slippery. It was able to get away. The win condition for the Beast was not to be destroyed. Like the bangles were the binding element, and he was in any body, any living thing. It doesn't have to be sapient. He could take control of it and have a body to use. So that was the point of that. And so he was just wanting to keep on going. So for the enemy, living, just existing, was the win. That's why it was willing to run away. It had no problem with running away. And enemies that run away can be quite frustrating for your players, because they keep trying to hit them and they keep getting out of range. And so figuring out ways to use your players' rounds, actions, I should say, up in ways that don't always involve combat keeps them on their toes, because they can't be like, well, I just hit it or I hit it one time and then take some negatives to hit it another time. Well, you can't really do that if it keeps getting outside of your range. You've got to keep up with it and then be able to hit it. And so you're constantly playing this balance game with them about allowing they get just enough distance on, because of maybe they've built their characters certain ways, or they're different in certain ways with their build. They have range on them and stuff, and you're able to have a better grasp of time and management of what's going on in those moments as the GM, to be able to keep the tension up without having to have combat constantly going all the time, or at least battle rolls going all the time. So you keep the tension up without necessarily the fighting. But I don't know how well that translated. You guys would have to say that as players. So.
Well, and I think another way to look at mixing up combat is, because it's so easy to not do this, especially as a GM and making encounter stuff, but to actually play intelligent NPCs. Not in that they're so clever that they can figure it out, but like, oh, we shouldn't have done this fight, let's surrender. Or, oh yeah, look how fast that guy just took out Bobby, we're running. Right? Because that creates interesting encounters. And that's another thing. I like to always call things encounters instead of combat, because an encounter can be something that doesn't involve fighting too. But anyways, but it mixes it up, because it's like, oh, these are real people, and oh, now they're terrified, and it creates interesting stories. It's like, oh, we surrender, please stop hurting us, and stuff like that, and can make it very interesting in that regard.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen that take place with. You see that when it happens, players will immediately kind of switch gears in their head. You can almost see them be like, oh, wait, they just surrendered. What am I supposed to do about this? And it's like, well, what do you want to do about this? What would your character do if somebody surrendered? You have complete power. Like maybe they're rolling and they roll a whole bunch of explosions and just absolutely literally mystify, literally turn somebody to mist with their roll, and those buddies are now like, whoa, no, we're done. They lay down their arms, all that type of stuff.
Well, what could be even more interesting is if some of them surrender and some of them don't. Right. How are the players going to react to that? Because like, okay, but do I still have to worry about you stabbing me in the back as I worry about your other? Right. And so then it's even more gears, because it's like, wait, okay, they surrender, but they're still shoot. Wait, what do I do?
Right. Some run, some fight, some surrender.
Mm-hmm. And that can depend a lot on your character, on the PCs, I should say. The PCs, they may be no prisoners type of PC, but the rest of the PCs might not be that way. Like in our collaboration game with who was it, Dan?
Oh, Min-Maxed.
Min-Maxed, yeah. I wasn't sure that my lawful evil kobold was going to fit in. It turned out okay, but he had somebody grovel before him, begging for his life, and he's like, "No, that's what I want is your life." And so he took it. And in the group, it was fine because he was a poacher, and poachers were especially hated by at least two of the other in the group, and then one of the others didn't care, and then one of them was lawful neutral and was more about self-perfection rather than other people. So it all worked out in that sense, but it could have caused a lot of drama within the group had this lawful evil champion basically executed. He was not a threat anymore as far as they knew. He was not a threat. He was begging for his life, and this character said no, and he just killed him. If that had been done in a different group,
right, that could turn into a challenge event. Just throwing it out there too, of like, if that's a dramatic tension point within the group, it's like, okay, this character's clearly going to do this. What is everybody doing? You could even remain in initiative order, and now you're stretching time a little bit. It's like giving the players time to decide what they're going to do, whereas the characters only have seconds or less to decide, of course. But again, bringing that challenge event we're still rolling, we're letting the dice kind of direct the story, but here's what's going to happen, and then let that play out. I really like that.
Yeah, and another interesting thing you can do is to bring in NPC allies or just other NPCs that are not enemies in interesting ways. Whether to make a complication like, oh, there's these villagers right over there. They're ducking and they're frightened in cover. The building's on fire over them, but you've got these enemies over here. What are you going to do? Or something that I like to do at some point in campaigns. I like to, and I think Dan might recognize this, I like to introduce something that's interesting, like some sort of, maybe in fantasy setting, some sort of small, intelligent, sentient creature, like, maybe a squirrel on a small boat, and give the PCs a chance to maybe save this insignificant little thing, and then later bring that insignificant little thing back to help them or save them because of a life debt or blood debt.
Mm-hmm.
Because that creates an interesting, like, oh, they're having real trouble with this. You know, all of a sudden, this squirrel on a cat comes marching into the scene and slashes the eyes right before he swings at you, and you recognize him. He's the one that you saved from the bear, you know, something like that. Just to, you know, just to give them an edge in a fight, bringing in kind of Deus Ex Machina, but not quite.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Just something
NPC
to
Ex
change
Machina
the story in that moment.
Yeah. Pull a
And
Sir
I'll,
Didymus on it.
Now, when I did that, it backfired because then they wanted the squirrel to stay with them and teach
Gotta
it
catch 'em
to
all.
speak, and so I couldn't bring him back in for that moment. But he ended up helping, and then they figured out they could make him 4 times as large.
Yes,
But
that was
he
fun.
it still was interesting.
Well, and to pull a Levi on the flip side, they not rescue it, and it comes back later for revenge.
Squeaker, squeak, squeaking! What did he say? I have come for my revenge. Yeah.
Well, and if you kept playing, Dan, you guys, do you remember the creature that you freed in the very beginning? The really large dog creature?
Yes. Yes.
That creature was still leveling up and was going to come back.
Oh, good.
Well, that's...
Well, maybe the squirrel will show up and save us.
Well, it does give a lot of having the NPCs there as an option, you know, whether they're put in danger for the NPC, for the PCs to save, or whether they are a danger should they be released.
Right.
Those are 2 options that present a lot of nice, both flavor for your world. You can say, well, they're allies with this or that. Especially if you're dealing with games that have slightly more political angles to some of the factions in them. The townspeople may want to help you, but they don't know that you're going to be able to help them get rid of the bandits that take over the town every time the harvest comes in. So they want to help you, but if they do, and you don't work out, then there's reprisal for them, and they have to live here. Like your adventurers that are coming through and are like, "We'll help you," and then they're like, "Sure, you will." It's like, what happens when you're gone, type of thing, and
Help.
and what happens when that group of bandits is gone, and you can build on that story too. You can have a small combat start to have larger and larger repercussions depending on how deeply you want to dive into this, mixing up your combat with other things going on. So those are fun options for world building within your combat.
For sure.
Maybe that grandma in the window throws a pan at you because that particular bandit is her grandson.
Yes. Oh, that's good too.
And he didn't join the bandits because he wanted to. He joined because there was no other work. You know, you can pull on a whole bunch of heartstrings if you do it right.
Yeah.
All right. People are starting to get tired. And
Yeah.
people are starting to get
Well,
tired.
For me,
Fatigue's
so-
a real thing, right? That's
Yeah.
a good bane.
Fatigue. It is good. It's pretty good bane. It's pretty good bane. Let's do final thoughts then. So, what do we got?
I think my final thought, in general, what we've been with all the stories and stuff too, is the thing that really comes to me is the stretching and shrinking of time. because those challenge events or the things we're talking about is either a challenge event to stretch combat, so fewer rolls to cover a large amount of times, or like Moustache's idea of a rolling initiative, but you're not actually going to combat, is actually shrinking time, or shrinking it, so it's like this very short moment feels really intense because every single second counts. And in like Levi's story, technically that conversation time is being stretched, where that conversation holds this weight that is compared to what the other characters are doing, which probably realistically took longer than the conversation did. But you're stretching and squeezing time as the narrative needs, and being flexible with what you're using in combat, how you're running your combat encounter, or like Moustache says, just encounter in general, the stretching and squeezing of time to fit the narrative, being flexible with that I think really can help you, one, determine what direction or avenue you want to take, and also how you can play with heartstrings and the moment and the narrative tension there. And of course, comment below how you have used all of these tools, or if you have ideas, because RPG stories are the best.
Yeah, basically what I'm hearing is subvert expectations, throw wrenches into it every now and then. Did you just think about dodgeball?
No, I was thinking close. Game masters are just monkeys, and they're just throwing wrenches at these gears. Like, the gears are going, and we're just like, what? Let's see what happens.
I do this.
Yes.
Maybe I'll do this. There we go.
It's a lot more like the stuff's all going nice and smooth, and then you just kind of, oops, and you just.
Like a little kid with a blank face. What if I push it off the table and it falls? Let's see how everyone reacts.
Cats.
Cats and children.
All right. Any final thoughts from you, Levi?
I think a nice way to also help keep combat interesting is make sure your players can throw in a good amount of flavor and change up how the tone of things are going to go. Like, keeping them engaged with the narrative side of it, and giving them some ways to make sure not all encounters are combats. More side thoughts I had otherwise, as opposed to things I had gotten around to discussing.
Another day.
True.
Yep. We have that document that people can edit.
Add those side thoughts.
All right. Well, for my final thought, I say that use combat to tell the rest of the story, because combat tells stories just as much as other things do and don't. So, rolling what I'm going to call in my system causality dice, and seeing how things progress in a battle and in a thing, and then mixing that in and figuring it out, makes for a lot of fun and a lot of good stories. So, let me see. What would be the thing that people type in this time to prove that they've made it this far?
Answer this question.
All right.
How do pirates prefer to communicate?
How do pirates?
Eye to eye.
Eye to eye. You got to spell it right. So, eye to eye. That's the comment for this time. As always, we hope that if you enjoyed, you'd consider supporting both the Planar Crossroads and Avenue Studios, as well as purchasing some of Open Legends products, because we enjoy them. If you want to support the Planar Crossroads or Avenue Studios, that is with locals or Patreon, and then or just contact us directly, either one of us. And then the Inn of Planar Crossroads also has a subscribe star if you use that. As always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
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 This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
Y'all is
All right,
tired.
Dan.
Yes.
You'll probably be able to figure this one out.
Uh-oh.
What lies at the bottom of
put
the
that in.
ocean and twitches? A nervous wreck.
That's pretty good.
Oh. Well done. That was fun, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we came up with good stuff. Now that we've solved all the problems that combat will ever have.
Yes. For legit, I'm going to use some of the ideas and stuff that we talked about next Bomb Squad.
Good.
It
Nice.
is needed. And now also, I need to pee again.
Okay. Well, before you go,
I gotta wake up
What?
my son to pee because he's wetting the bed. So.
wow. So, why can't pirates learn the alphabet?
They always get lost at sea.
That's a good answer. Because they spend
That's
years
good.
at sea.
Okay, all right, on the same vein. All right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, same vein.
Levi's vibing. Oh no, it's time to go. Levi's in the zone.
Don't you remember we put out that magical mishap? Levi's got big dad energy.
He does. It's true. It's true.
That's either out or it's gonna come out. Can't remember.
I
Anyway,
don't know. Yeah,
All right. I should sleep. I am approaching 1 a.m.
as am I, my friend.
nah.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
getting close to midnight here
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the real
Yeah,
time
which
zone.
is late enough. Yeah,
Ah.
In the true
in God's
time zone.
right?
The important people time zone.
We just, on the East Coast, we're just running a little faster. We just can't stop.
Let's
Can't
see.
stop, won't stop.
East Coast is too fast. West
Yep.
Coast is too slow. So, in the
Central.
middle, just right.
Just
right.
All right, Goldilocks.
Mountain Time, we don't know what's up with them.
Yeah, they're in a different zone.
They're all high. So, that's why it's
no,
Mountain Time.
that's good. That's better.
Oh, all right.
Go, Levi, go.
All right.
Night.
Good night, you guys. Thank you.